Welcome to Books for Success. Today, we're delving into the wisdom within Off Our Chests by Liza and John Marshall. Engage in a marriage story that weathered sickness and health together. Enhance your knowledge of cancer and the people who have overcome it. You'll learn the importance of your loved ones, what treatments are available for cancer, how cancer affects family life, if the journey back to regular life is easy. Subscribe and ring the bell for notifications if you want to keep receiving the knowledge of book summaries about health, wealth, love, psychology, and much more. Don't be shy about dropping your book suggestions for us to summarize. Also, you can use this video as an audiobook summary. Let's grow and succeed together. In the name of love and Hippocrates. Don't you feel a little claustrophobic whenever illness takes hold of your body? It settles comfortably, sapping all your resources, and now you become a host for a vicious virus that is trying to bring you down. Your body doesn't feel like your own, and you wish to return to normalcy as soon as possible. Recovering from it and no longer dealing with dirty tissues and cough drops is a great feeling. Unfortunately, some diseases linger for too long, altering the person's life forever. Cancer is, perhaps, the cruelest disease in the history of medicine. Often detected in the late stages, it robs us of the space saved for plans and dreams. Each year, the medical community tries to improve cancer treatment to at least equal the scales between those who have survived and those who have passed on. However, this remains a tough battle when we consider the mortality rates. Yet even in absolute darkness, there are stories like that of Liza and John Marshall, who faced cancer hand in hand as a patient and doctor and as a wife and husband. Their marriage turned out to be their secret to a successful recovery after peaking at the void. Still, the story would be too romantic if they hadn't changed a bit. No disease passes without leaving a trace. Yet these two managed to find their way back home, and now they want to share the route with you. In no way are we in a position to dictate how someone should react to a disease. But we're confident that those who can beat any hurdle alongside us are treasures worth cherishing forever. So, are you ready to peer into the void with us? A not-so-grateful Thanksgiving. Back in 2006, breast cancer had already budded into several new types. Unfortunately for Liza Marshall, a former lawyer-turned-housewife, and her husband John, they unwittingly became pioneers for research advancement. The story begins on a regular day in their life. But as it turns out, everything is not so typical after all. Thanksgiving is one of those holidays filled with plans, anxiety, and eventual joy. This scenario took an unexpected turn for Liza when John, an oncologist accustomed to delivering grim news, announced her breast cancer diagnosis with a trembling voice. Her results ended up on his desk at the GI oncology department amidst his stack of patients. Ironically, even in the face of such terrible news, Liza couldn't stop thinking about organizing her Thanksgiving pies. She'd already lost a friend to cancer and knew many women battling it. John suspected the diagnosis even before it was confirmed. His keen doctor's eye had noticed his wife's swollen breast. He also lost his mother to cancer, and the thought of losing his wife was unbearable. After all, both his mother and Liza influenced his career choice in one way or another. Additional MRI and CT scans revealed an even more unsettling picture. Liza had triple-negative breast cancer, a rare and often lethal type caused by hormones, and was nearly unresponsive to conventional treatments. Once the realization had settled, the treatment discussions started. Fortunately, John's field of work granted Liza early access to the latest research, but it didn't make a treatment strategy any easier. Her cancer wasn't easily detectable on the scans, so shrinking the mass with chemotherapy before physical removal wasn't an option. The case was urgent, as the time between discovering and eliminating the cancer had to be as short as possible. So, Liza underwent surgery immediately after Thanksgiving, removing her right breast. It's never easy to lose a part of your body, especially to disease. Your appearance changes, and so does the way you perceive yourself. Like everyone else, it took Liza some time to readjust to the new reflection. Meanwhile, her treatment had only just started. The importance of family bonds during a storm. As the scar on Liza's chest was healing thanks to continuous and careful care, she had to start the second stage, chemotherapy. Thanks to John's work in the field, they had access to a clinical trial by Southwest Oncology Group, SWOG, which had developed a treatment plan using drugs like adriamycin, Cytoxan, and Taxol. The preparatory stage involved more scans. So John was happy when Liza chose his workplace, Georgetown University Hospital, for treatment. He entrusted his wife to longtime colleagues because his expertise couldn't be completely objective when it came to his wife. Plus, remember that he was a GI oncologist. The first 2 weeks of Liza's chemotherapy posed new challenges for John. Liza handled the household's bills, passwords, and routines for most of their marriage. Now, John found himself entangled in domestic matters he had previously overlooked. Additionally, their once passionate relationship took a turn, resembling one between a doctor and a patient. While John hoped for a smooth treatment journey and made plans for the future, the fear of losing Liza to cancer lingered in his mind. As for Liza, her relationship struggles spread over to her parents, who grew up during the Great Depression and weren't used to opening up. The news of their daughter's disease petrified them emotionally, so much so that they barely brought it up during conversations. Their emotional paralysis deeply hurt Liza, but she courageously confronted this issue despite her physical and emotional frailty. Fortunately, their children, 13-year-old Charlie and 10-year-old Emma, showed remarkable maturity about the news. Having accepted the reality, they helped their mother choose a beautiful wig when chemotherapy had taken her hair. Surprisingly, the trip to the hair salon turned into family bonding, helping John and Liza to stabilize their relationship. And she even got some compliments on her choice. Difficulties are inevitable in marriage, both in health and illness. John and Liza, united by 22 years of matrimony, faced these challenges together. Trying to stay afloat. Having a cancer patient and an oncologist in one family had benefits and unexpected disadvantages for the Marshalls. John, whose experience with terminal patients brought him closer to their caregivers, suddenly had to become one. Each day could drastically differ from the last as the chemo gradually weakened Liza's body, triggering painful side effects he didn't have a solution for. John wasn't able to help Liza as a specialist, so he was visibly worried when her legs started to hurt, and she could barely walk due to the more aggressive chemotherapy. It was part of the trial, but she still wasn't ready for the overflowing drug cocktail boosting her immune system. John also hated funerals, especially those of his patients. For him, attending their final farewell was something he couldn't afford. It felt like a professional failure. And now that his wife was teetering on the brink of life and death, he was in the same boat as his patients and their families. The queue at John's office suddenly looked different for him. There were adult children with ill parents, wives and husbands, brothers and sisters. Some were alone, and John couldn't help but wonder how they managed to stay afloat. A whole new dimension of human experience had opened before him. Liza, on the other hand, displayed remarkable resilience during the initial phases of her treatment. Her condition fluctuated from week to week. At some point, Liza learned to enjoy chemotherapy in the circle of careful nurses and hospital snacks. The Lombardi Cancer Center, where she received treatment, even hosted an arts and humanities program for oncology patients. The waiting room in the clinic was filled with artists, musicians, and dancers who came to cheer up the patients and spare them a one-on-one battle with their illness and depressing thoughts. But despite these efforts, Liza knew that pain would always follow short relief. At some point, her feet hurt so unbearably that she agreed to take the $600 painkillers, the cost of the innovative treatment. Did you know? According to the 2022 research in Nature Review's Clinical Oncology Journal, cancer is becoming more common among people under 50. The ghosts of the past and present. It would be surprising if Liza's diagnosis did not change John's perception of his profession. Now that he's been on both sides of the table, he revised everything oncologists say to their patients when it gets dark. Granted, when doctors look for better words to deliver the bad news, they do it to uphold patients' hope, which has to become their safety net for times of fright and despair. John did the same with Liza by keeping some things unsaid. On the other hand, he tried to stay moderate regarding enhancing the chemo in the hope of a cure. But in Liza's case, more aggressive treatment with platinum, chemo drugs derived from specific heavy metals, was necessary in light of triple-negative breast cancer. As suggested by John's former boss, a straightforward and somewhat harsh man, platinum was highly toxic to the bone marrow. In February 2007, Liza had almost finished her first part of chemo when the platinum therapy followed. Eventually, the amount of her white blood cells became too small to continue. She also developed an eye cyst that bothered her for some time, not to mention constant fatigue and other symptoms. If not for the severity of the diagnosis, her case would have proved that too much treatment wasn't a guarantee of success, and for John, that was challenging news to deliver. As cancer was at the center of John's and Liza's lives, somewhere between her chemo and radiation therapy, the last stage of treatment, John received a box of letters from his aunt, who also turned out to have cancer. The letters were from his mother. As he read about her pain, he wondered how she could still care about trivial things when she had just a few months left to live. And while the letters were greetings from the past, his wife was fighting the same battle in the present. Eventually, the exhausting treatment finished, and 8 months after the diagnosis announcement, Liza found herself without a clear path forward. Getting back on track. A lot has changed since Liza first got her diagnosis in 2006. Her treatment was successful, although the 3-year wait for a relapse was daunting. Still, life was moving on. However, it would be naive to think cancer hasn't metastasized within the family dynamic. Metaphorically, of course. At some point in her remission, Liza realized one concerning thing about herself: she started to feel competitive with other cancer patients. She survived the deadliest kind of breast cancer, yet many of her friends didn't know about its fatality, leaving her confused and distraught. It felt like other patients didn't have as severe trouble as Liza had with unprecedented chemo dosages. At those times, she had to remind herself she was lucky to have a husband in the field and access to the latest treatment options. Speaking of the husband, the disease took the greatest toll on John out of all the family members. Having seen his wife struggle, he became more informal with his patients, sharing his contacts and answering even their most minor concerns outside work hours. The absence of a work-life balance made him irritable and angry, which caught the attention of Liza and their daughter Emma, who was now a teenager. Another thing that bothered John and made him feel like a needy egoist was Liza's decision to do a full mastectomy to prevent another cancer. Naturally, his opinion was secondary because it was a matter of Liza's own health and body, but John admitted to being frustrated about the perspective of an incomplete sex life. This question bothered the couple as they tried to consider each other throughout their marriage. In the end, Liza, too, felt inadequate with only one breast. Not to mention, it was simply impractical when it came to clothes. Finally, in 2012, she underwent a mastectomy and, in 2013, an implant operation. Now, the last sign of cancer has disappeared. After a serious discussion over dinner with Liza and Emma, John also went to see a therapist and finally felt more optimistic about the future. Liza found solace in charity, running a fundraiser for cancer patients. Ultimately, the couple rediscovered happiness in each other. Conclusion. Despite decades of research, cancer remains one of the most frightening diseases in the world. Let's look at Liza Marshall in 2006. Her triple-negative breast cancer was the most lethal of its kind, putting her life at risk despite receiving the latest treatment. Her story is one of those fortunate with a supportive family, doctors, and sufficient medical insurance. Unfortunately, her case is one of few. Cancer continues to be the leading cause of death, so improving our knowledge of it is critical for our awareness. Liza and John unveil the sides of oncology that many don't think of at first, like relationship troubles, sex, and life after recovery. It's easy to get lost in the battle and stop thinking about the future. After all, it has been blurred for a long time. However, continuing to dream, making plans, and carving time for loved ones between chemo sessions proved to be a treatment in itself. The Marshalls' marriage is a story of mutual trust, resilience, and empathy, the critical puzzle that supported Liza throughout her treatment and rehabilitation. We need love and support whenever our resources run low. Mental challenges always follow physical changes, forcing us to revise and fall in love with a new version of ourselves. It's important to remember that our value is within us, and as long as we've survived the storm that life gave us, our value will increase tenfold. After all, scars are just reminders of our legacy, not our failure. Try this. Educate yourself on cancer. The American Cancer Society, National Cancer Institute, and Cancer Care provide a wealth of information about detecting and treating oncology. Check yourself for mutations in the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, which are responsible for heightened cancer risks in both men and women. Thanks for being part of our insightful voyage. If our summary piqued your interest, we encourage you to dive into the complete book for a deeper understanding. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more content if you're new here, and share it with others who might find it valuable. Keep on reading, discovering, and advancing until our next adventure.